Thanks very much. I am the only person who appears without tie. I asked Jonathan Porak to switch tie, but he refused. He sort of refused a tie with Japan. So I'm a bit ashamed of myself without tie. Let me talk about Mr. Abe's foreign policy, possible foreign policy after the upper house election coming summer. Most observers speculate that LDP under Mr. Abe will win at the coming summer upper house election, and he may possibly seize the majority of the seats in the upper house, which does mean that LDP will have majority in both houses, theoretically meaning that Prime Minister Abe will have a free hand in pursuit of his own goals, even in the foreign policy. But let me try to be very objective, because I left the government 8 years ago as a deputy foreign minister, and for the past 8 years I have been observing Japanese foreign policies, exchanging views with the public intellectuals in many countries. So I am accustomed to analyze the Japanese foreign policy in a much more objective way. I will be talking about, I think, 5 areas, policy areas: economic policy, the possible constitutional revision, the question of the past, history, and the national security policy, and Japan's policy to East Asia. Those 5 terribly important policy area for Japan. First, the question of economic policy. After the upper house election, Prime Minister Abe will have a very serious time in pursuit of his what we call Abenomics, because Abenomics is said to have 3 arrows: the very aggressive financial policy, flexible public investment policy, and the third, growth policy, growth strategy, which is yet to be elaborated. And this growth policy must involve a thorough deregulation, and also the sort of new policies in the inefficient industrial sector, agricultural sector as well. And all this, the growth strategy must coincide with Japan's participation in the negotiation of TPP. So for the remaining period of this year, Japan will have to tackle with a vested interest domestically. If you are to talk about liberalization in the agricultural market, you would have to fight against the vested interest which has been favoring LDP as the sort of in various elections, and sort of there has been strong political lobbies. Agriculture has got a strong political bodies, but yet LDP, I mean, Japan will not have election for the coming 3 years after the upper house election. So there is a possibility, there is a real possibility that Japan may be able to get rid of all the vested interest and go a very deep deregulation and also reforms in the agricultural sector as well. And this is probably one of the best opportunity for Japan to be able to make a very strong contribution to the international trade as well. So let us wait and see what policies Mr. Abe will pursue in the field of the growth strategy and also TPP. And also I would very much like to see the economic integration in East Asia as well. We are talking about trilateral free trade agreement between Japan, China, and Korea, along with RCEP, the much more wider regional free trade agreement as well. So those 3 agreements may lead to the liberalization of the Japanese market as well. Point number 1. Point number 2, the question of constitutional revision. there has been lots of talk about the possible revision of the Constitution of Japan. And indeed, Mr. Abe, the grandson of Mr. Kishi, also a very conservative politician, nationalistic politician as well. This may be, constitutional revision must be his ultimate goal. But yet, probably, it will take longer years for Japan to come to the sort of real revision of the Constitution. The Prime Minister Abe talks about the revision in relation to the procedural clauses, the Article 96. But there has been strong disagreement in relation to that, because why don't we start debating about procedures before sort of debating the real substance of the constitutional revision? So my guess is that it will take more than 3 years for Japan to address the substance of possible revisions of the Japanese constitution. So probably after the next general election, which is supposed to be taking place in 3 years, there may be the case for real constitutional revision. Now, let me talk about the third issue, question of history. I have been campaigning in Japan that the question of the history may not be only to do with the question of the pre-Second World War. The question of history is also to do with the history after the Second World War, and in particular, after the issuance of Murayama Statement in 1995. There has been sort of controversies regarding Murayama Statement and also Kono Statement, which is to do with what we call comfort women. There has been strong criticism against the possible revision of those statements from the neighboring nations, not just neighboring nations, but from the United States as well. I say that we need to face up with the history, not just the history before the war, but even after the war, even after the issuance of Murayama Statement. We cannot deny the fact that all the cabinets, after Prime Minister Murayama, who is a socialist, but the LDP prime ministers have endorsed Murayama Statement as well. So there is no other way but to make a full-fledged endorsement of Murayama and Kono Statement. I think Prime Minister Abe is a very nationalistic and conservative politician, but yet he is a very strong pragmatist. So I would hope that he will not touch upon the question of reinterpretation of the history. The fourth element is to do with the question of national security policy in Japan. There is a strong likelihood that Abe administration will come up with various legislations regarding, for instance, the establishment of Japanese version of NSC, National Security Council, because we do need a sort of strategic unit in the cabinet to deal with the question of broad strategies. I think foreign ministry needs to be sort of participating in much broader interagency sort of set for creating the Japanese strategic policies. So most probably the new Abe administration after the upper house election will produce various legislative initiatives regarding the establishment of NSC, but also in relation to the question of collective self-defense. It may be needed for Japan to talk in serious way to enable the self-defense force to participate in, for instance, peacekeeping operation in a full-fledged way. It doesn't make sense for Japan to send troops, but without shooting, even when there was sort of attack to the fellow blue helmets. Doesn't make sense. But the current constitutional interpretation is that due to the Article 9 of the Japanese Constitution, those activities on part of the self-defense force in the peacekeeping operation is forbidden as well. Doesn't make sense. So I would hope that the constitutional reinterpretation will take place in relation to the UN activities. But in relation to the activities with the United States, I think we need to wait for the constitutional revision. In case we change the constitution so that we exercise collective self-defense with the United States, we would probably need to revise the US-Japan Security Treaty as well, because Japan does not have any obligation to defend United States under the current existing treaty. In case we are able to exercise our collective self-defense duty, there is a need to change the US-Japan Security Treaty in a much more reciprocal way. Let me complete my statement by talking about Japan's East Asia policy. Prime Minister Abe, probably Chinese colleagues interpret Abe's policy. People call it value policy, meaning that Japan wishes to strengthen the partnerships with various nations who uphold democracy, like Korea, like India, like Indonesia, like Australia. It's called value diplomacy. I do not like it at all, because value is important, but yet there are a bunch of different values as well. So democracy is one thing, clearly, but yet the policies toward better governance probably must involve democratic principles, but that direction I think we need to support. So there's no reason why we should put China in isolation. And there is no way for us to put China in isolation, because we are so interdependent. Therefore, I would very much hope that Japan will come up with much comprehensive East Asia policy. I talk a lot about the triangular relationship between Japan, United States, and China. If you look back for the past 150 years, the fate of East Asia has been decided by the triangular relationship between China, United States, and Japan. First, Commodore Perry came to Japan because the United States wanted to trade with China. The United States wanted to use Japan as a supply port. The second occasion, Japan was quite aggressive. Japan became modernized and went into China. The United States wanted to stop it. So it's all this triangular relationship. This time, China has risen, and China will rise in enormous way. Japan is in decline, but yet Japan has the right opportunity to create a win-win situation in East Asia. Because Japan still has a formidable economic, technological capacity. Therefore, I think what is important for us all, and particularly for the Abe administration, which will most probably last for the coming 3 years, it is extremely important for us to come up with the right East Asia policy, which is to do with the triangular relationship between Japan, United States, and China. I finish here. Thanks very much.